Not through the exceptional one ascending, rising up, but through the ordinary many rising. So as Garvey told us, it's the masses who make the nation and the race. We got to empower the masses. We got to organize the masses. We got to break the monopoly that the oppressor has on black minds. Though liberation, as Dr. Karenga says, is impossible and unthinkable. You, and yes you, in the audience, have a responsibility to get your mind in order. You must take it upon yourself to seek people out like Mansong Kulubally. There are a lot of us out here. There are a lot of elders like Dr. Anderson Thompson, Dr. Harold Pates, right here in Chicago. We have a plethora of thinking men and women who can assist you. We have many programs, many avenues that you can, pursue that would let you get at empowerment knowledge. We have to change our value systems, dear people. Values, according to Kawaida philosophy, are very important. It helps us focus ourselves and focus our energies. Values are essentially cherished ideas, dear people, that you become committed to, you give priority to, and it dictates what you and I become in this life. So we must consciously reorientate our value systems. That's a big part of the cultural revolution that the Honorable Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik al-Shabazz urged us to be about before he left this world back in 1965. The Nguzo Saba, or 7 principles that Dr. Karenga and the organization US have codified for us, were true and good for us in 1965 and 66. They're also true for us now and into the future. We have to deal with many of the African Senate historians, African Senate theologians like the Honorable Jeremiah Wright of Trinity United Church of Christ. We have to pay very close attention to the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. All of these, we have men and women in all of these organizations that can help us become sane again. And we have to understand that we are under attack. I said on Mark Sim's show a couple of years ago that we are literally at war. We are literally at war. I have a book that I also tell people about that I've had for a little while. It's called Who Needs the Negro? This book was published by a white man named Sidney Wilhelm in the year 1967. Back then, this book cost about $1.50. And even though books cost $20 nowadays, and even though a lot of things have changed since 1966 and 67, there are certain principles that remain intact, certain underlying conditions in America that remain intact. There seems to be a hidden public policy of keeping the so-called Negroes, the African in America, the African American people, in a state of dependence. It seems like capitalism as a system thrives off someone being on the bottom, getting kicked up and down the stair steps of life. That's structural. That's a structural impediment in America. So even though we might have individuals like Oprah Winfrey, we might have all the bloodletting gladiator sports types like Michael Jordan, LeBron James in 2008, Kobe Bryant, all the football players running that football where they're making all this money, have these huge contracts. We may have entertainers like Bill Cosby and, folks, making money in the movie industry and so forth. That does not deny the fact that the majority of our people are still catching hell. Now, there are things that we can do as a people, and that's called internal reparations or internal repair, that we can do But we got to have the right mindset to begin to think about doing those things. There's also external repair that we are demanding from this government and those business interests that profited off the enslavement of our ancestors. We got to fight for our ancestors, and that is reparations. I refer you to Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics. He talks about that. He also has a website, www.harvestinstitutereport.org. Go to that, and he has an article talking about the clock is running. And he deals with affirmative action and all those issues from an alternative point of view. And he does deal with what we need to do in order to get reparations. Reparations is international law, y'all. That is the real struggle. Because once we can get the just compensation in a variety of forms from this government and those business institutions that profited from our enslavement, we can then deal with economically repairing ourselves, repairing our families, dealing with educating ourselves the proper way, and a whole variety of, solutions to the problems that ill affect us. There's no pat phrase, no simple thing that I can say to you. There's hard work, and we must engage in that hard work. But first we got to simultaneously free our minds in order to recognize that we do have some hard work before us. A lot of us, as I've said, as I sit here in Mandrake Park in the so-called year 2008, Thursday, July 31st, a lot of us have been bamboozled, hoodwinked, and tricked about the nature of this society and the evil ones, the evildoers. A lot of us think that Dr. King was murdered by James Earl Ray, a lone gunman. I would urge y'all to get this book. It's called An Act of State, The Execution of Martin Luther King. And it would deal with J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI, the CIA, Army Intelligence, and the government and business classes, and even mafia element, all in cahoots to murder Dr. King and stop the civil rights movement back in 1968. So one of the things you have to understand is that those who have historically oppressed us, who came to our mother continent, Africa, waged war over long periods of time, penetrated excuse me, penetrated our peace, and captured us and enslaved us in all parts of the world and took the land from those they didn't take. They are not going to teach us right. So the educational system is suspect. We got to understand that just because you get a degree, I got 2 of them, doesn't necessarily mean that we're making progress. We got to have an education for power, as Dr. Chinwezu Ibekwe from Nigeria talks about. We got to deal with what Carter G. Woodson talked about in Miseducation of the Negro back in the 1920s. We got to deal with William Watkins' book, The White Architects of Education. We got to deal with Amos Wilson's book, The Falsification of African Consciousness. We got to deal with Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, the psychologist. She talks about the ISIS papers, Keys to the Colors. We still are victims of white supremacy domination. But we can't understand that if we let all these distractions in America distract us. We're at war, even though Barack Obama is on the verge of becoming the first black president.